Hello, hello, hello. How's everybody doing? Hello from Ohio. How's it going, dude? What part of Ohio? Thank you. I'm down to the wire today on this outline, guys. I'm just like right in the intro. May I'll just like freeform it. See if we can do it. I may have to redo it again multiple times, but I keep saying that, but then I keep nailing it, so I don't know. We'll see. Sup, Cotiro? Haven't seen you in here before, I don't think. I've seen Big Smoke. Seen Jordan. I don't know if I've seen Devontae, have I? Maybe. I remember you guys. Benjamin. Maybe. I can't tell if I've seen Benjamin or not. I've definitely seen Matthew Russell in here. Ah, Kotira's new. Nice to have you, man. Pumped for you to be here with us. So the way that this has been working so far is basically I have a little topic that I riff on for a little while, and then open it up to conversation with all of you guys, answer your questions and whatnot. Thank you, Devontae. What's up, Steven? How you guys doing? It's Monday, and I'm struggling a little bit. It's losing that hour of sleep. I was kind of counting on that hour. I was relying on it, and then it bounced on me. So I just forced myself to get up anyway, knowing that I was going to be tired today, potentially even tomorrow, and just to try and keep myself on a good schedule. That's one of the places where I'm still trying to get it down exactly as my like sleep schedule, trying to get like in bed early. That's the part I struggle with, because I always just want to like stay up and like do fun stuff, and then I screw myself over because I don't know what it is. Like, if you're awake for, X amount of time, theoretically, it shouldn't matter if it's in the morning or, later in the day or whatever, just as long as you're awake for that time. But like, I don't know. I swear any time before like 11 o'clock is like, for some reason, 10 times more productive. So I have to keep getting myself up. I'm trying to get myself up at 7 a.m., which is difficult when you work for yourself and you can get up whenever the heck you want. Yeah, dude. Like, what was it? Like, if you're going to talk about things that probably can have some of the biggest impact on your life, sleep's got to be one of them. It's got to be one of the like the biggest things. And anyone who like has been a part of our NoFap Academy course know that me and Alexander, when we run the mentoring calls, that's something we're always harping on, because like it does so much for you. It increases like your willpower, it increases your focus. It makes you overall happier. Like, it's improving your sleep patterns is like significantly more effective than antidepressants for like making you feel better and stuff. It's wild. So anyway, let's get into the topic for today. What do I got for us? I got to talk about perfectionism. So let's do this. All right, let me introduce this thing. Welcome to Universal Man. Yep. I swear, whenever I like go to like actually begin a video, my throat starts acting up just because it's a little bitch like that and wants to make things more difficult for me. It's the nerves. All right, try it again. Welcome to Universal Man, where we turn... One more time. Welcome to Universal Man, where we turn your flight into fight so that you can... Guys, what is going on with me today? I can't get this. Welcome to Universal Man, where we turn your flight into fight so that you can... Welcome to Universal Man, where we turn your flight into fight so that you can master yourself and conquer your goals. My name is Mark Webbett, and I'm here to help you sharpen your masculine edge. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about perfectionism and how it's a big, fat excuse for you to hold back and to hide. And I know this because I've done it my whole life, and I want to talk to you about how I'm getting over it. Nice. All right, that'll work. So yeah, perfectionism. Perfectionism is a killer, man. It's a rough one, and it's something that some people even take pride in. They're like, oh, I'm a perfectionist, and that's why I keep screwing myself over, and kind of chuckle to themselves, and they think that other people look fondly at them when that's just not the case at all. Perfectionism is a terrible, stupid thing. Really, what perfectionism is, it's an excuse to not do the things that you know you should be doing, under the pretense that, oh, well, it's just got to be better. My standards are just so high. I just care so much that I'm going to allow myself to be less. And I think it's just BS. And the reason that I'm talking about this is because, that's what I talked about in my newsletter that I sent out yesterday. So if you're not part of my newsletter, make sure you go over to universalman.com and sign up for it. The website is not finished yet, but you can still sign up there. And actually, that is what prompted this whole thing. I realized that I was holding back and not putting up my website because, it was going to have to change because I'm in the process of writing a new course. And I knew that if I put something up now, I'd probably have to change it later, and it wouldn't be in its perfect final form right now. So I just wasn't doing it, even though it would be significantly better for me to have something rather than nothing. And that's really kind of the heart of this whole perfectionism thing. It's this illusion that somehow having nothing, just because it's not perfect, like having nothing beats having something. And that's just the lie. That is the lie that the perfectionist holds on to. And so the core solution, from what I can tell, is to just get the hell over yourself and actually care. Like, if you care more, well, then you're going to have to acknowledge that, yes, having something, even if it's imperfect, is significantly better. In fact, maybe infinitely better than having nothing, right? And that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do, to put yourself out there and admit that you are an imperfect being, but that's the reality of it. That's all we are. That's all we can do, is we can give our best, and it's never going to be perfect. And if you're really going to take, self-improvement and excellence seriously, then you got to look at the reality of the situation where getting good at something, putting out a very highly polished whatever, is the result of perpetual failure. And I think that this has been pretty much proved repeatedly. Something like, what was it? There was some study where people were learning how to do clay sculpture, and one group was told to just make as many clay sculptures as possible, as many as they could churn out. Don't worry about whether they're good or not. And then they told the other group, try as hard as possible to make your clay sculpture good, and just focus on doing one really good one or a couple really good ones. And obviously, the people who just churned out a bunch of stuff, those are the ones who improved far more rapidly. And you can see this in pretty much everything. It's if you want to write a good book, write a million drafts. Write a million drafts. You have to get comfortable writing a crappy draft, and then a slightly less crappy draft, and then every single layer of draft, you chisel away a bit of the crappiness, and maybe something a little bit more good and valuable emerges. And that's just the way it works. That's how everything works. Whether it's yourself, some business endeavor, your workouts, whatever. It's once you have something, it's so much easier to improve upon that thing. And so stop dragging your feet and get something. Do something, and then improve upon it. Then iterate, right? If you want to work out and you just don't know where to start, you don't know what program to do, you don't know whether you want to go to a gym or whatever, just start going for a walk every day. You doing that, it's creating a space. It's saying okay, well, if you can get into the habit of going for a walk every day, and maybe it's just you start doing push-ups every day or something like that. That forces you to do actually a lot of things that maybe you don't see going on. You're creating space in your day that wasn't created before. You're creating some boundaries around it. You're creating some discipline around it. You're getting yourself to show up and already do something uncomfortable. And that's the hardest part. And so once you get used to doing that, just switching up what you do in that time, it's really not that big of a deal. So it's get moving, do something, and then you can iterate on it, and things get much, much easier. Now, the problem is that people say the reason why they're a perfectionist, they're really kind of looking at it, they're saying, oh, it's because I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of the judgment of other people, or I'm afraid of my own judgment, or heck, maybe I'm even afraid of success. And I think really all this is just a fancy way of saying I'm afraid of change. Because if you put yourself out there and you try something, all right, and say it goes terribly, All right, say it goes terribly. Say you fail. Say you try to start a YouTube channel and no one watches it, no one gives a crap. And what does that mean? Well, it means you have to respond. It means you have to make a decision. It either means that you have to change your approach, which, forces you to confront a bunch of uncertainty, or it forces you to confront another path. Well, maybe, you're not going to do YouTube. Maybe you're going to do something else. Well, what was the impulse that got you to go to YouTube? Maybe that needs to be expressed in a different way. And I think that when you're actually out there pushing yourself, trying imperfectly to do something, you're given constant feedback from reality. And you have to kind of integrate this feedback and you have to change. Because if you just keep grinding away at life in the exact same way, refusing to change, well, I mean, that's going to be, what am I saying? Like, I think it's like for me, okay, let's take this into a personal level, okay? If I put out a bunch of content, okay, well, what would that mean? That would mean that I would have to find a way to live in a manner that would allow me to put out a bunch of content. So that's what I'm doing right now. That's why I started moving to live streaming, and I put that off for the longest time because I was attached to who I was. And the person who I was a significantly lazier person, a person who was significantly more attached to having free time to do stuff I didn't really care about, but for some reason I was attached to that free time. I was attached to that buffer. I was attached to living free from the pressure of having to show up regularly to produce this kind of stuff. And what I had to do was let that old person die so that a new person could be born. And that is a difficult thing. And we get so attached to the way that we've been operating, and we don't want to let that person go because we know that person. Even if that person kind of sucks and isn't very happy, we like it because it's familiar. We are so averse to figuring out what something new looks like because our brain is just inherently averse to change, averse to uncertainty. It's because whenever there's uncertainty, our brain kind of as a defense mechanism, just imagines that there's monsters out there, just imagines that there's bad things. And this is kind of like a survival mechanism. So it's the thing that prevents us from running full speed through dark woods at night. It's like we're programmed to not do that because our brain says, hey, there's risks in the unknown. Be really, really careful. Be afraid of them. There might be sharks lurking in that water. There might be a bear out there, or there might be, something that's going to sneak up and kill you. And, fair enough, there is. There is stuff out there that we have to watch out for. But I think the bigger danger in most cases is stagnancy, is failure to adapt. That's what causes a species to go extinct, is failure to adapt. And humans, we are the most adaptable. That's why we're at the top of the food chain, because we have mastered the game of evolution. But in our cushy modern comfort times, I think that many of us have kind of regressed a little bit. We've fallen into these bubbles, into these patterns of whatever feels comfortable, that's what we're going to do until we die. And I think it's like if we're going to go to what Jesus says, it's like if you want to save your life, you must lose it. And I think what that's about is really embracing this evolutionary principle that, like, if you want to hurry up and get living, well, then you need to hurry up and start dying. And like this happens on a macro level of like understanding like, well, yeah, you're going to die someday, like in a very literal sense. Like your time on this earth is finite. And if you can really look that in the face and acknowledge that, well, that's going to put a spark in you. That's going to make you want to do something with your life. But it also, I think, exists on the micro level too, is that like, if you want to live a vibrant existence, one that's actually full of real life, well, then you're going to have to burn off all that dead wood that's holding you back. And I think the perfectionists, they just don't want to confront that dead wood. They're afraid to acknowledge that they have dead wood to burn off in the first place. They're afraid to acknowledge that they have these imperfections that they need to prune, and cut off and kill. And that's what it's been for me. Like my tendency has been to retreat into like this realm of hiding and polishing up myself and my content, my ideas, and being very stingy about where I expose them because I was trying to minimize the criticism that I could expose myself to. And like part of the reason why I've studied so much self-development is because I never felt like I could do anything. I always felt like I had to get better. I had to get stronger. I had to learn this. I had to learn this. I had to become more capable. I had to become more productive. And all these things were just excuses to prevent me from putting myself out there and doing new things. Because when you start doing new things, you're being a new person. And being that new person, it feels weird. It feels scary. It feels uncomfortable because you're not used to being that person. And, you much rather just dive back into that old life, that old person, even if that old life and that old person weren't someone that you particularly admired or liked. But, the way forward is kind of like learning how to ride a bike. All right. It's very difficult to balance on a bicycle when it's not moving. In fact, it's extremely difficult to do that. But if you get moving and you learn how to course correct as you go, that's really what it's like to embrace and embody this kind of evolutionary spirit into your day-to-day living. Like there's different levels of this. Like the people at the bottom are the people who never change and they never evolve. Even in the face of the world saying, hey, what you're doing is not working, they'll just double down and then just, not change anything. I'm sure you can think of people like this. And I can't imagine living like that. I think it would be terrible. Then you've got the people kind of in the middle, who maybe they'll change, but only if they absolutely have to. Basically, their life needs to force them into a corner, and then they'll think about changing, and it's like a big deal, and it's really hard, and that sort of thing. But I think the place you want to be is the person who can look forward to that change and change proactively. The person who learns how to ride that bike. They're the ones who are constantly looking for ways in which they can kill off old, unhelpful parts of themselves and be reborn as something better and something new and something more powerful. And that's what I'm promoting here. But in order to do this, you got to get over yourself. You got to be humble, because this humility, it's kind of like the lubricant of this process. Because if you're humble, then you recognize you don't have it all figured out, and you recognize that you don't really have a whole lot that's really worth holding on to. In the parts that are worth holding on to, you can recognize them for, the things that they are. Like if you're a proud person, you think all your ideas are great. If you're super into yourself, you think all your ideas are fantastic. You think you got it all figured out. If you're a humble person and you think you have something figured out, well, chances are you do. At least to some extent, you probably got it down pretty well. And so you can hold on to that and recognize, this other stuff, I don't know. Maybe that's just conditioning. Maybe that's just what my parents taught me. Maybe there's a better way to look at this. And so that humility and that willingness to undergo this process of death and rebirth is the key to overcoming perfectionism. You just got to get over yourself and you got to get it done. So hopefully you found this useful, insightful, helpful, whatever. Give me your feedback in the comments below. Please please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp. All right. 19 minutes. That'll probably be about 15 minutes when I edit it down, maybe. What do you guys think of that one? Thanks, Flagship. What do you guys think of this when I'm kind of more off the cuff and just going off? I feel like my thoughts are a little less streamlined and structured than my previous stuff, but I feel like I can get way more emotionally engaged because I'm just sort of going off. What do you prefer? Do you prefer something that's much more structured and concise, or do you prefer this kind of stuff? MR says, Mark, what are some good questions to use in an accountability meeting? Here are some that I've used. What success happened and why? What failures and why? Upcoming opportunities and threats. I think that those are good. That's a good start, but you really want to drill into it. So if you're running an accountability group and someone expresses a failure, okay, you really want to diagnose what went wrong on multiple levels. So you want to figure out what they did, why they did it, and the why is the very important. That's the part that kind of branches into a number of questions. So it's well, what were you thinking? Well, what were you feeling? How did you rationalize this poor decision? Okay, well, what would be a better way to respond next time you're presented with the same situation? And that's really kind of the core thing that I think an accountability group offers is the ability to kind of do this work of iterative growth. And in order to do that, you have to figure out exactly what went wrong and what it would look like to do better in the exact same situation next time. Because the reason we all get stuck is because we do the same shit over and over again, and we fail in the same ways, and we're just wasting time. So if you can turn your failures into something productive, well, that's kind of the pay dirt there. That's not a failure anymore. That's actually a success. That's a growth point. But in order to do that, you got to do a little digging. Allah asks, whatever happened to the NoFap Academy YouTube page? I'm still subscribed to that. Are you and the other guys still in communication? Yeah, we're still running the course. We just haven't made YouTube videos for that in a while. I'm going to be releasing a bunch of new stuff on porn addiction recovery in the coming months. So I'm going to ask you to stay tuned. But the course itself for NoFap Academy is still up and running, and we still run the mentoring calls for that every week and that sort of thing. Jay Dahana, the idea of killing the self didn't come to me until I went for a random hike in the woods. And I want to be clear here. It's not so much that you're killing the self. It's just that you are killing parts of it. You're killing the parts that are dysfunctional. You're ultimately doing it so that you can have more life. Think of it like as a pruning process. All right. If you want to prune a shrub or a tree or whatever, you're going to prune the branches that are low or unhealthy or not the ones that you want. You prune them, and what that means is that the energy, instead of flowing into those dysfunctional branches, it's going to flow upward into the ones that you want. And this ultimately can allow a plant to be more appealing, bear more fruit, be healthier, stronger, larger, etc. So that's really what we're looking at here, is this process of self-pruning. But it is, that part that's being pruned, it feels like it's dying because, it kind of is. And that's the tough part. But yeah, I think you got it. Kodara asks how to find an accountability group. Well, if you stay tuned here for a little bit, I'm going to be launching one for this Universal Man project in the next week or two. So, otherwise, you have to let me know what kind of accountability group you're looking for exactly. Matthew Russell says, sometimes your structured stuff is really great, but it can be very dense. So I've often had to listen multiple times, whereas this stuff is just like, bang, here's an idea. Yeah, I think you're right. Sometimes I think with my structured stuff is I would condense like really big ideas into something very concise, which I'm not sure is always the best move. It can be, but I think a lot of times, especially for YouTube, something a little bit more accessible might be good, which is why I'm enjoying this stuff. Stefan kind of echoes that sentiment. Appreciate that feedback. Programmier, I can't read your name. I'm on NoFap successfully since like half a year. My girlfriend is going to be in another country for half a year for her studies. I don't know how I'm supposed to do hard mode for half a year. You're supposed to get stronger. That's how you do it. If you can only do it because you're having sex with your girlfriend, then you're not really mastering your sexuality. You're still pretty much a slave to it. So, you got to man up. You got to learn how to be like, okay, I can actually live without sex. It's only when you can live without sex that you can actually master your sex drive. Otherwise you're going to constantly live in this state of being a slave to the cries of your wiener. So you got to get stronger, dude. Ah, okay, Sebastian. Okay. Yeah. Oh, Jeremy. Okay, you're talking to each other. I see. The neck cracking video. Yeah, I'll do more. I should do some more stuff like that at some point. I kind of like looking back at some of those old videos is a little bit cringe for me, but they worked. They worked for what they were. I want to do some different kind of content moving forward too. So I've just been trying to adapt myself to this stream schedule. I'm getting better at it. It's starting to feel good. Matthew asks, do you feel comfortable making these yet, or are you still struggling with perfectionism? Not so much with these, because the whole reason I did these is so that I could do less, like be less perfect, be more off the cuff, be more kind of candid and genuine. I would really struggle if I was doing these not live, I think. If I was actually trying to sit down and make these more polished, I don't know if I'd be able to do, do less polished videos, but not live. Like that would just feel like a waste, kind of. Like if I was going to put that much time and energy into making something structured, I would want to. It would drive me nuts to not have it just good enough. So not so much with this. Trying to balance that with my new course, though, is a little bit tricky. What's the balance between good enough to be able to stand for a number of years? Like hopefully, like my new course, I want it to be like the core of the Universal Man platform, at like the foundation level of the Universal Man platform for years, as long as I can. So it's like, how do I pursue that level of quality while also being realistic that it's got to come out. So hopefully I'm striking a balance with that. I know actually just showing up here and talking with you guys all the time really just it's each time I show up and talk about something, it's kind of like a rough draft. It's a draft of content that will be polished up later. And it's like, the more I talk about stuff, the more I share my ideas and get feedback from you guys, the better they become. So it's all really wonderful. Thanks, Tackle. Yeah, I'm trying to be more real with you dudes. I'm glad you like the emails. Thank you, Flagship. Outlaw asks, Mark, could you explain your ideas on NoFap and what it has personally done to you, as in who you were before NoFap, what it has done for you, and who you are now as a result of it? Yeah, I can do that, but I'm not going to do that right here because that's worth doing like a full video on. Like that's one of those things that gets a lot of views and whatnot, and I would want to take some time to really prep my response for that, because it's that's a big one, and that's something I want to make sure I do pretty well. What book recommendations do I have currently, and what am I currently reading? I'm currently reading, what am I reading? I'm reading for kind of like fun, I'm reading the Justin Cronin or something Cronin, The Passage books. They're all right. They're not my favorite, but they're all right. They're entertaining enough. And I just finished one book called The Testosterone Hypothesis, which was okay. I wanted to love it, but it wasn't as good as I was hoping. And what is the book? I just downloaded a book. It's like not on like my normal stuff. Where is it? Let me bring it up. I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. It's probably something I could like learn mostly through like Google searches, but I was just like, I need to like set up a system for setting money aside. And this one looked like a decent one to just give me some ideas. I'll probably like read that in like a day. And I just finished reading Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. That was really great. If you guys don't know that somehow, you should check that out. Tobias asks, how old are you, Mark, and at what age did you start the whole self-improvement journey? I started following since your first NoFap video, which I ran into on our NoFap a couple of years back. Well, glad you've stuck around, dude. I am 28 years old right now, and I started my self-development journey, I guess you could say kind of officially, when I read Psycho-Cybernetics, and I believe I read that in 8th grade when I was 14. And so since then, I've been studying like a lot of that stuff. I've been really kind of interested in how to optimize myself. And as I said, a lot of that self-optimization came from a sense of insecurity and insufficiency, feeling like I needed to build myself up and be better and be better and be better because I was never good enough. And so that was like learning how to confront that sort of baseline insecurity was a big part of my journey. But, I've been doing it since then. Tobias, he said, you can't shake the guilt of not having started sooner. I keep myself from starting now, which I objectively know is completely bonkers. Yeah, it is bonkers. So stop it. Just improve yourself. Start. Pick a place and get going, and do it imperfectly. It's just like what I'm talking about, man. Like, do it imperfectly. Let it be ugly. Let it be uncomfortable. Let it be awkward. And very quickly, you're going to start making progress. Because the thing that really hooks us is when we move the needle in some way. Like, that's what really starts turning you on. It's very difficult to get going when you have zero progress. But once you get that first little 1% of progress, you're in. You know, it's like, I'm sure you have all seen this like a million times where like you have a bunch of stuff to do. You don't want to do it. You don't want to do it. You don't want to do it. But then once you start, it's so easy to just like get it all done. It's like, so get that 1% in and then start stoking that momentum, because that's what we are. You got to get that bike moving. It's difficult balancing when you first start pressing, but once you're going, you know, it's much easier. Kotaro says, everyone says that I should choose one habit and concentrate on it until it really becomes a habit. But what if I already started a lot of habits and it's hard for me to do all of them? But in the same time, I don't want to give up some of them since they're all really beneficial. Should I concentrate on only one anyway, or try to do them all? Well, if you're not able to do them all, and you know it's not working, you have to maybe focus down a little bit. But it also depends too on the scope and what exactly you're doing. I mean, sometimes it's more about the selection. So like, you need to almost take on something big, which then forces a whole bunch of other stuff to get in place. So for example, like me taking on these streams, it's forcing me to be much more deliberate about how I structure my time, how I plan my days, and all this other kind of stuff. I had to get like way more, it forced all these other habits to align by just taking on one thing. And so if you can find those kind of linchpin sort of things that are like, maybe for you, like, I don't know, if you're a college student, maybe it's like, all right, you have to actually take your schoolwork seriously. And you sit down at the beginning of every week and the beginning of every day, and you go through your calendar and you block off study and assignment time. Okay. And you start really doing that. Well, if you start really doing that, well, then a bunch of other stuff's going to have to fall in place. You're going to have to maybe think about, okay, well, I'm going to get exercise here, or I'm going to, this is where I'm going to eat. Maybe this is how I got to modify my sleep patterns, and all these other things start having to fall into place. So, focus on the big bang for your buck stuff. Don't try and be doing like a million little tiny habits, like a million little hacks and tweaks and things like that. Those things are very person to person. All right. What little habits you're going to have, you should let those be determined by what the big goals are. Okay. Like if you're going to be an athlete, well, then you're going to probably have like a bunch of little habits around, your physical care routine, okay, and like maybe your diet and stuff like that. If you are someone that relies heavily on cognitive performance, well, then maybe it's going to be a lot about sleep. Maybe it's going to be about neurotropics. Maybe it's going to be, about that kind of stuff. Maybe it's going to be about your reading habits or whatever. Like you have to maximize yourself based upon your goals, and I think that's one of the big things that gets lost in this culture where we always want to look at, all right, this successful person, what are they doing? Well, let's copy what they're doing. Okay. Well, if I copy what they're doing, like their habits and, routines are all optimized so that they can be good at being them, so figure out what you want to be good at and then work backward and figure out, okay, what habits and routines are actually going to optimize that goal. Miekzu says, do you think that the NoFap community on YouTube is a little bit toxic? I mean, it's great to be on that and improve, etc., but they are cringe sometimes, isn't it? I'd have to know who you're talking about. I don't actually look at a bunch of other NoFap guys' stuff, mostly because I don't think, like, most of what I've seen is not good, to put it plainly. But there are guys out there who have far more views than I do on a lot of their stuff. So maybe I'm maybe I'm wrong. But I think a lot of it's just kind of like, it can be motivational. It's like, hey, get out there and do it. But I think a lot of the stuff they say often is just incorrect. So it's painful for me to listen to that. But which is why I'm going to be doing like a significant amount more in that sphere moving forward, because I think there's some stuff that's got to improve there. Allah asks, have you found being married has contributed to your journey with NoFap? I'm getting married in August, and although NoFap has done wonders for me, and I'm confident, I think you're just asking, okay, so how has marriage contributed to my journey with NoFap? I already quit porn by the time I got married. And if you're looking to marriage as a way to make rebooting easier, I don't think that's going to be the reality of it. Like, if you're looking at some kind, like, I guess it can help in the sense that you can have companionship. You can have a place where you say, all right, my sexuality is meant for her. That's a clarity that I think is, beneficial, that is valuable and can probably help. But, the person who thinks, oh, well, it's going to be easier for me to not use porn because I'm just going to have sex with my wife. I don't think that's really the way it works. And that isn't the way it works from what I've seen from people, because I've worked with plenty of dudes who were married and they still couldn't quit porn. And in fact, it can actually end up being ultimately more difficult, especially if your wife is super against it, is not very supportive of you continuing to use porn or relapse or whatever, which is a very real possibility. So it kind of depends. It kind of depends on your situation, where you're at, and everything like that. But yeah, it all depends. Matthew says, often when I'm being a procrastinating perfectionist, my reasons for not doing things, you find your reason for not doing things more reasonable than your reasons to do things. Is it worth arguing with that voice, or just march on? Well, it's worth looking at it. Is it actually reasonable? Is it actually more reasonable? Like, you have to figure out what you want in life first, right? That's got to be the determining factor. That's why it's so important to have a vision for yourself. Because if you have a vision, you can say, all right, will this move me toward embodying this vision? Or will it move me away from it? If it'll move me toward it, then it's probably a good thing and I should probably do it, right? And even if my emotions say they don't want to because they're being, whiny and annoying and, unhelpful. So you have to have some kind of measuring stick, which would be your ideal or your vision, to hold your feelings up to test how useful they are. Sometimes your feelings might have some very useful information, and you need to mine your feelings for that. It's just developing that skill of kind of translation and analysis, where you translate your feelings into words and then you rationally analyze them. That's an important skill to have. And if you do this consistently, eventually you're going to find the same old kind of excuses come up. And once you learn how to dismantle them in one instance, it's very easy to see, that's that same old kind of, irrational perfectionism coming up again. I'm definitely better off doing something rather than nothing here. And it's like, once you kind of figure it out once, it kind of stays figured out more or less. Every once in a while, you'll probably lose it and you'll have to come back to it. But that tends to be the way it works. So if you're unsure, write it out. Write out what the feeling's saying and then respond to it. That's what I would recommend. Oh, no, I live in Philadelphia, and outside of Philadelphia, and he's not in California either. I think he used to be. He's out on the East Coast now. And you're welcome. Kotaro asks, how to write a vision for your life. What should I include in it, and should I read it every day? I think maybe what you can do, like, there's a bunch of guides out there. Guides that'll walk you through this process. If you want to do it like on an in-depth level, my buddy, he's going through Jordan Peterson's self-authoring suite, and he says that's really good. And there's like one part of that course that's called your future authoring, where you describe your ideal future. So you could do that, or you could just look up personal goal setting guide. And you'll find stuff that'll walk you through developing a bit. Probably, I would assume, like the typical way you do it is you figure out, okay, where do you want to be in 10 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 1 year? Where do you want to be in a month? Where do you want to be in a week? You break your vision down, you start kind of big, and then you work backwards and you break it down as much as possible. And sometimes, you're not going to be able to see too far into the future. And in those instances, well, you just kind of have to start closer rather than further. And it's one of those things where maybe you have to get more information as you go. So it's like, if in order to construct a bigger vision, you realize you need more information, well, then you need to take action. You got to do stuff. You got to do stuff to have experiences. You got to do stuff to learn things. You got to do stuff to, expose yourself to more options. And so, maybe short-term vision planning would be more useful at that point. What about fetish ritual behavior? Could you be more specific? Breaking self-destructive behavior is check out my video on deep trigger processing if you want to know how to deal with that feeling of not acting on, some unhelpful urge. Danos asks, motivation versus discipline. Can one exist without the other? People, that's kind of a semantic thing. How are you defining motivation versus how are you defining discipline? I guess what people are usually saying when they're saying motivation versus discipline, they're defining motivation as a dopamine kind of impulse, meaning like you want to do it. Okay. And it feels good to do it. The thought of doing it's exciting. That would be motivation to most people. Discipline would instead be something that you do because you know it's good, but it doesn't necessarily feel good. Usually it's kind of uncomfortable in the moment and, will feel good later. But even engaging in some form of discipline requires technically some kind of psychological motivation, maybe not dopamine, but it requires you to say that's good and I want that more than I don't want it. So it's like, really I think the distinction is between sometimes things feel good to do them, which is great. That would be, motivation. But sometimes things don't feel good, even though they are good. And so that's where you need willpower. That's where you need to learn how to force yourself. And I think ultimately the goal is to learn how to cultivate both. You have to cultivate your capacity to do things you don't want to do that are good for you. But you also want to learn how to cultivate an aligned neurochemistry where your dopamine and other motivational systems are lined up with your actual goals. Because at that point, that's when things get really awesome. When you actually your dopamine is aligned with your goals, the serotonin is released when you do it, and that kind of stuff. That's what my work is here. It's not always immediately fun to do my work, like to sit down and write an outline or whatever, but a lot of times it is. And because I've done a lot of work to get over it, and a lot of what you have to do is kind of cut out the things that would suck those useful neurochemicals in a negative direction. That's like why I think porn is such a big obstacle for a lot of guys, is because it steals your dopamine, it steals your serotonin, it aligns it with the gutter with some unuseful action, and because of that, it's not being lined up to actual useful stuff. And so by learning how to cut out that black hole of porn that's sucking all your motivation into it, once you can realign that stuff with your actual life, then that's what things get really good. I'll ask, do you ever think you'll have some sort of radio show on here where we can call in and ask questions live? Yes, I do. That is another part of that thing that, if you're part of my newsletter, what I was mentioning yesterday is that I want to start a Patreon. And in that Patreon, it's going to give you guys access to a community that I'm going to run through Discord, if you're familiar with Discord. And that'll allow people to call in and that sort of stuff. And I'll also probably do specific member-only live streams where I can use this other stuff where I can even bring you on through video if you wanted. If you didn't, that's fine. But ultimately, I want to have much more interaction with you guys. Kudero says, is it okay to have flat lines regularly? I can work and stick to my habits for about a week, but then I don't want to do anything and I just waste my time for a couple of days. What can I do with it? I'm not sure exactly what you mean. So anytime you engage in some kind of activity, any kind of new activity that's an act of kind of mostly discipline, meaning discomfort first, pleasure later, there's going to be a point where the novelty has worn off. You're not excited about doing this new thing anymore, and it feels like a total grind. And it's at that point where you have to keep pushing. You have to keep investing your comfort, keep trading your comfort, and you're not going to be getting anything in return, at least neurochemically, for a period, until eventually your emotional mind kind of like rolls over and it's like, all right, fine, you really want to do this? Well, then I'll build the neural circuits and, I'll make it so that I don't fight you every step of the way. And so you have to get through that grind part. Otherwise, the change is never going to be permanent and you're going to keep stepping back out of it. So you have to, one thing I would recommend is get some accountability, get someone to help you get through that grind period, because use whatever sort of neurochemical leverage you can during that point. And social interaction is a huge neurochemical lever. That's why, I told people I'm gonna build my website so that I can feel good about asking for a Patreon, because by telling thousands of dudes my plan, that creates a huge amount of accountability for me, and my brain responds to that because I'm a social creature. And so, learn how to leverage this stuff and get yourself through these sticking points. Matthew Russell says, kind of unrelated, but when does discipline become overworking? When it's wearing you down. Like when you find yourself less filled up than more filled up. Like good work will fill you up. That's what I've noticed here, is that that's why I really like this stream, is because yes, this has caused me to work harder, but it's ultimately actually invigorating me. I'm living my days with more vitality. And so when you find that you're going in the opposite direction, then that's probably a sign that you are overworking yourself. How much will the tiers cost for the Discord community? Just like a few bucks. It's not going to be expensive. I want it to be something that pretty much everyone can do. Do I have any recommended books? Yeah. I do. I need to put together like a reading list. I want to do book reviews and stuff too. I think that would be really cool. Yeah, I said yes, I do have books to recommend, but then I didn't recommend anything. I'm trying to think if anything off the top of my head. Okay, so, you got the classics. You might as well always hit the classics in whatever genre you're interested in. So if you're interested in self-development, hit the classics there. You got Psycho-Cybernetics, you got Think and Grow Rich, you've got 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the How to Win Friends and Influence People. I would put Scott Adams' book on something like How to Fail at Everything but Still Win Big, I think it's called. I forget what it's called, but it's a very good one, because it talks about systems versus goals. I would say another good one is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. That one was pretty eye-opening for me. I don't think what other good ones would be. I'm sure I can come up with more. Go ahead. Feel free to put any other ones in there if you guys want. Outlaw asks, I know this is a little off topic, but could you talk more about marriage and how things change from dating to marriage, or the good and the bad? That's kind of a big, broad topic. I would have to think about that a little bit, about what exactly I would say. I'm all for marriage, though. I love being married to my wife, but it's something that it takes work, and you got to find the right person, and you have to be willing to grow in it, because it's just like your own life, but expanded. It's like your life's only going to be as good as you decide to make it. And, it's going to require discipline and sacrifice and that sort of thing to make it awesome. And a marriage is no different. In fact, maybe even more so in that direction, because there's another person involved. So sometimes your sacrifices might be entirely for them, and the sake of, peace and goodness flowing between you. I don't still meditate at the moment. Kind of like I don't have a formal practice at the moment. I mostly just kind of go through some specific things like before going to sleep, and I pray every day. But I try to make sure that I actually prefer to nap more at this point than meditate. Meditating, it develops your ability to be self-aware. It develops your ability to focus, but I don't really need more of that right now. I'm almost potentially even too self-aware of what's going on inside of me often. And so I don't need more self-awareness, and I know how to focus. So at this point, me living my life well and making sure I stop and reconnect to important things, that's more than enough for me. Other people would say that, meditation is still necessary. I don't know. Maybe I'll go back to it in a more disciplined way at some point. What is my opinion about having cold showers? I think cold showers are great. I think that they're an excellent way to immediately understand the idea of delayed gratification, because it feels terrible at first and then it feels fantastic. I did them for a while. I did them for like a month straight at one point. You can check my video out. I have on it actually. But at this point, I don't really do a lot of them during the winter, particularly here in the Northeast United States. Just it's a little bit more cold than I'm interested in dealing with, and I already have taken on enough discomfort in my life that I don't feel like I need to make my showers difficult. But if I was in the process of helping, getting comfortable with discomfort, which is what I was when I was practicing that, I was, still early in the Sacred Sexuality Project and that sort of thing. I think it's great for people who are quitting porn and that sort of thing. But at this point, I probably will bring back contrast showers when, the summer hits again. And I'll do them every once in a while, like after a workout and that sort of thing. They're pretty cool. But actually what I've noticed is that if you do them too often, they actually stop feeling so good because your body just gets used to it. And then it's just cold. And then I'm like, I don't know. People say there's all these other benefits to it, and probably is, but not worth it to me at the moment. Is Philadelphia where I love to live? That's where like my family is. But I am going to be moving within the next year, probably down to North Carolina, around the Charlotte area. So still trying to figure all that out. Thoughts on sparkling water and pineapple pizza? I've become a big fan of like flavored sparkling water. Have you guys tried LaCroix? That stuff's good. Like I mostly just drink water, so just like spice it up with something a little different flavored. I enjoy that. Pineapple and pizza, meh. It's not my favorite, but pizza is pizza. I don't know if I would love Cali. I don't know. Like I feel like I'm not nice enough to live in California. I feel like you gotta like be either like nice or superficial or something, or like have a really great tan. I don't have any of that. You live in San Diego? I have a buddy who lives in San Diego, actually, a good friend of mine. I will actually probably be out in San Diego sometime this summer-ish for his wedding. Don Ross says, what are your thoughts on the law of detachment? What is the law of detachment? I've never heard of that. Outlaw asks, nice, do you think you will ever meet some of your followers depending on where you go? Yeah, I would love to. I'd love to do like in-person workshops and that sort of stuff. Like my goal is get this course out, write a book, and then start doing speaking. Hopefully like, doing some speaking tours and whatnot. So I would love to meet you guys. Where do I work? What am I doing for my life? This is my job, dude. This is my job. I'm a professional life coach, and I also have a course that I sell online on quitting porn. You can check that out at nofapacademy.com. And yeah, that's how I make my money. The purpose of this channel is to help men, be awesome men, to become men that they admire, to learn how to essentially stop running, stop living in an escapist, masturbatory way, so that they can learn how to live as like a universal man, to live in a way which is what I would describe as fertile, which meaning like more goodness, more life for themselves and everybody around them. And in order to do that, you got to learn how to fight. You have to learn how to stop running and start fighting. And that comes down into your masculine biology, learning how to trigger the right parts of your brain so that you can live as an excellent man. And so that's what I'm all interested in. Would I come to Europe someday? Yeah, sure. I've been to Europe once when I was in high school, and it was amazing. It was really cool, the parts that I saw. What would I recommend to someone who broke a very long streak and is finding it very hard to get back into NoFap? Get an accountability group. Get someone that you're talking to on a regular basis, and who will hold you accountable. Okay, I think that's one of the easiest ways to do it, and also start tracking your streak again. Get some buy-in. Shake things up. Don't just kind of abstractly try again. Make some real gestures to reinforce the fact that you are trying. Sometimes you need to have more movement around what you're doing, because like quitting porn is a process of not doing something. So make sure you are doing stuff. You have to replace that porn use with other things. And sometimes, putting it into porn recovery activities, like working on the forums, talking to other people, that can be really beneficial. But then also you want to make sure that you have proper goals and things that you're pursuing instead. Oh, Don Ross clarified the law of detachment, where the moment you detach from your desires, your desire becomes more likely to become a reality. I think that's sort of true. I think the way it really works is that once you accept the full spectrum of possibility, which meaning you accept the possibility that it won't come true, that's part of it. But you have to expect the full you have to accept the full spectrum, meaning like you could absolutely get it, or you won't get it at all, or any of the myriad of things in between. I think when you fully accept the full spectrum, that is probably the best place to be, and you still drive toward it. So it's what I would call, it's more of detached involvement, where you're detached from getting the exact thing that you want, but you're still driving at it and giving yourself fully to the process of trying to make it real. I think that's the best place. How much is a decent YouTube setup for audio and video? Well, if you have a DSLR camera, then that's the most expensive part. But the audio setup, like this mic was probably almost like $300, and then you got to get an audio interface, which is like another $100 to $200. But I mean, you can get like a condenser mic, like a USB condenser mic, for like $100 or less, and like a cheap interface for probably $50 or less. Maybe not even need an interface if you're using a USB mic. So I wouldn't take you like that much more. All right, dudes, I'm gonna get out of here. I gotta go eat. Got to edit this video up, but appreciate you all coming out. This is really fun. I'm really looking forward to, I'm seeing you guys like doing accountability partnering in here, and I think that's fantastic. This is exactly why I want to like have an actual community for you guys all to regularly interact in. So yeah, this is wonderful. All right, guys, thank you so much. You guys stay clean, stay sharp, and I will see you on Wednesday. Peace.